McClure is going to be talking about the Coral Castle. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing today? I think I heard you all say yes. I got my air conditioner going in the back. Today was a 108-degree day. Incredible, incredible, incredible. Tomorrow's supposed to go back up into the teens. So it's going to be like that for the next couple of days, and then we're going to start dropping back in the 90s. I never thought I'd ever be happy to think, oh my gosh, it's going to be 95. Thank you, Lord. But yeah, that's where it's at. Boiling, boiling, boiling. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. Hot Sacramento, California. We are 45 members up and down the state, which means if you think you may have a paranormal need, we can help you out with that. It may take us a couple days to get to you because California is huge. It's a big, big, big state. So in the case that we can't get out right away, we do have mediums on staff who can talk with you and figure out, whether it's paranormal or not. And in most cases, when it is paranormal, they can settle the energy down and until we can get out there. It usually doesn't take us more than 1 or 2 days. All right. That being said, just a quick warning on the internet today. Again, it's a big news day, and I've gotten 2 internet warnings on here about slow internet. So if I disappear, something goes wrong, or we get frozen for a couple seconds, that is why. Everybody in my neighborhood has Xfinity internet. So there's only so many lines coming into the neighborhood, right? Okay. If you're watching from Facebook, and a lot of you are, and you haven't done so already, please hit that follow button. We're always looking to build up our followers. Love it, love it, love it. And during the show, if you like what you see and hear, please feel free to hit that thumbs up, or happy faces, things like that, or those weird hearts that I can never do with my hands. Please, feel free to do that, and come into the chat room and chat. And now, we're more than happy to answer questions during the show. And I'd like to see your names there. It's fun. Same thing with YouTube. You go over to YouTube, and all these social media places work basically the same. So if you're over on YouTube and you haven't subscribed already, please feel free to do that. I've got more than 1,000 videos over there, and they're all this show. So different topics, all kinds of stuff you can check out. Again, if you like what you see tonight, hit me with a thumbs up, hit me with a heart. Just something happy to say that you all like me. That would be great. And again, come into the chat room and chat amongst yourselves. Of course, I'll be talking with you too in the chat room, but come in the chat room and say hi, okay? Twitch works the same way. TikTok, like I said, everybody works the same way. TikTok, nothing with TikTok, you have to double tap the screen, for the likes. That's the only difference with TikTok. Okay. When we talk about you guys commenting during the show and doing things like that, that's an FYP issue, and I think you've probably seen that come up on a lot of reels posted, everywhere where it says FYP. What that is it's called the For You page. And what that is the perfect example is Facebook. When you're scrolling down Facebook and you get past the suggested reels that they have for you, there's another section of just suggestions. So there's suggestions of people that you might know or like, or maybe groups that you might be interested in. Facebook, looks at the master computer looks at your interests, and they put the suggestions out for you to click on. So that's what happens when you hit the like button, when you chit-chat amongst yourselves and all that. That puts this up and gets attention from the main computers at Facebook and YouTube and all those places. And then they put us out on the FYP, which is the For You pages, and that's how we get shared across. So there's your 5-second explanation on that, okay? And do share if you're home with somebody or you're in the car. Well, if you're in the car, there's no choice. But, well, maybe you got headphones on. But yeah, do be sure to share the show. Share us around. Some people even put me, Some people even put me in their pockets and clean house when I'm on the air. So it's kind of cool. Get to carry me around. Okay, tonight, I'm excited. I remember watching, back in the old days, all right, these different shows like In Search of and Unsolved Mysteries and things like that. Used to have features on this particular castle, and it's known as the Coral Castle, and it was built by obviously built by a gentleman by himself, single-handedly. There's a mystery as to why it's been built. Did he use alien technology? Did he use technology that the ancient Egyptians knew? I don't know. But my guest, Rusty McClure, has done a lot of research into this castle, into the gentleman that built it. So he's going to talk, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. He's going to tell us about all this stuff. So let me bring him in and get this show on the road, gang. Here we go. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm great. I love to talk about coral castles. So this is a great evening.
I'm so excited to have you on, sir.
Thank you.
Tell us about you.
I'm one of those guys that just kind of was always curious about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I had my own business, national business. Sold it. Had to have other things to do. Started taking all my curiosity and turning it into books. Uh-huh. And I found Coral Castle. I'm from Ohio, and my wife grew up in Miami, so we were visiting her parents. We had 2 little daughters. Hurricane Andrew had destroyed much of South Florida, and we couldn't go anywhere, so I grabbed up a bunch of brochures like you see. You've been to South Florida, I'm assuming, and many people, and you go into a little diner and there's all these little pamphlets that kind of all stacked up, rows of them. And one of them was yellow and had brown ink on it and didn't look like much, but I laid it mine on the table while we were eating breakfast, and I started reading about Ed Leedskalnin and Coral Castle. And I couldn't visit it because Hurricane Andrew had gone ground zero right through Homestead and destroyed everything, as it turned out, except one building, and that turned out to be Coral Castle. So this is in mid-90s, and I start slowly paying attention to it and wrote a novel that included Coral Castle, and the publisher said the novel was good enough to make a market for the book for Coral Castle. It had never been written. So we compiled and wrote the book Coral Castle. And
fantastic.
Some of you have seen it, maybe some of you haven't, but there it is. And we sold a lot of them, and the reason is because it's a mystery. It's a known secret. Coral Castle is a known secret. In other words, we can get to this, but I'll cut right to it. Early 1950s, Edward Leedskalnin got on a bus, rode to Miami, checked himself into Jackson Memorial Hospital, and died. Wow. And he died with the secret of how he built that castle. So that's why we talk about the mystery of Edward Leedskalnin and his American Stonehenge. So we could start and just talk about how he got to where he got before he died. And I think it'll be fascinating for those who don't know, and maybe we can fill in some blanks for the people who do know something about it. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Okay, so let's start with Ed. Ed's born in Riga, Latvia.
Okay.
And when he's 26 years old, supposed to marry a 16-year-old gal who decided that he was too weird, and on the day of their wedding, she said no. Heartbroken Ed Leedskalnin bolted out of Latvia to Hamburg, Germany, got on a steamer, rode to Ellis Island, like so many people did, and came to the United States. He ended up living with some New Jersey Latvians, and then shipped out to the Pacific Northwest, where he worked in logging camps, Washington, Oregon, British Columbia. We know that because as a foreign, non-American he had to go across the border, goes back and forth across the border, and every time he had to register with the authorities.
Mm-hmm.
He's 5'1" at the most, and he's self-conscious about how small he is. We know that because he lies about his height, and he at times convinces people he's 5'4", 5'6", and we found out that he was barely 5 feet, 5'1".
Wow.
So we begin to learn about Ed secondhand as well as firsthand, and that's how we got to have this book. Now, Ed most likely contracted tuberculosis and most likely was told by somebody in the Pacific Northwest the only thing you could do, this is pre-antibiotics.
Mm-hmm.
So stage 4 cancer, stage 4 tuberculosis are about the same.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is he does what every doctor back then basically told people, head south where it's warm and sunny. And the next thing we know, he's in Florida. And the next thing we know, he's in Homestead, Florida.
Okay.
And Homestead, Florida, 30 miles south of Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Last and furthest south on mainland United States city. Next stop is the Florida Keys, the Everglades. In the 1920s, there were 800 people lived there. Hardly anybody ever went down there because there was no air conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
There was no jet engine, no cars hardly, no roads. And the next person to see him is the guy driving along on the road, this little town, 800 people, sees what looks like a body lying on the side of the road. This must have been a very good guy. He stops, finds out that Ed Leedskalnin is still alive, takes him not to the hospital because the town's too small to have a hospital, takes him to the doctor. Only doctor in town, doctor says you got stage 4 tuberculosis. I don't think you'll be alive 6 months from now. And he stays in a tool shed behind this guy's house that they have fixed up to be a hospice place for him to die. Ed does. And 18 months, 3 years later, the doctor is asking him how Ed survived
Mm-hmm.
because he's still alive. And Ed Leedskalnin, through broken Latvian, 3rd, 4th grade education, says I use the powers of magnetricity to cure myself. Well, like what's magnetricity?
Right.
And so Ed then goes out the edge of town for $10, buys 10 acres of land, scrapes the dirt away. The next 10, 12, 15 years at the most, depending on which stage you want to count,
Mm-hmm.
Ed builds a castle. The walls are 3 and 4 feet thick. They're 8 and 10 feet high. They're 14 and 20 feet long. These are massive slabs of oolite limestone, which is under the dirt, South Florida, in the Everglades, so forth. Oolite limestone is coral rock by our terminology. It's basically coral rock. Very heavy, very brittle rock. He works alone. He works at night. And nobody in that town is ever allowed to see him. If they sneak up on him, if they happen on him, he somehow knows they're there and he stops working and covers up his tools.
Wow.
Ed Leedskalnin puts inside that castle obelisks that are taller and heavier than the obelisks in Stonehenge. They're as high as 42 feet. They weigh as much as 40 tons. If Ed would have been 6'5", it wouldn't have mattered because
Mm-hmm.
no human being by himself, herself, or any number of human beings would be able to do this. And the structures he put in there, we could talk about it if you have time,
Sure.
are amazing. I mean, they're just amazing what he puts in addition to their height and their weight. Now, give you a little bit of perspective. Ed did this, as I said, 12, give or take, years. The Druids, tribes of Druids, took 300 years to drag Stonehenge and erect Stonehenge. 300 years, tribes. This is one guy who's trying to survive tuberculosis.
Wow.
People would come to him. He actually ultimately gave tours, charged a quarter. People would come to him. How'd you build this? Ed's answer, I use the powers of magnetricity. Same answer he gave the doctor. What is magnetricity? He never explained it. He wrote a pamphlet. You can buy it in the gift shop at Coral Castle. You buy it online. And he talks about magnetricity, but he never really explains what it is.
Right.
Never tells what it is. And to this day, no one knows exactly how he did it. Nobody knows. But what I also can tell you is there have been all kinds of people from all over the world travel there. Many people have come up with theories, but no one person, now there's a few people that have done similar things. You can find them in YouTube and online, but there's no one has really ever built a castle by themselves the way he did it and make it look exactly. They've shown techniques, but they haven't built the castle, which I find fascinating. And I think you do too.
I find it so fascinating because when you think about this thing, I've done a lot of reading. I've done reading on it. Obviously, I've never been there, but I've done reading on it. And even on TV, when they've had shows that show this thing, it's amazing how he was able to do this. Like you say, he says it was this magnetism thing that he used, but it's just, I don't know. Do you think? I mean, do you think it might be aliens that he had help?
Oh yeah, I think it's very possible. Here's what I told the ancient aliens when they asked me that question. I said, it has to be a higher form of intelligence than we have, a different kind of intelligence. Now, he, more than a few times, said he had discovered the secrets that helped the Egyptians build the pyramids. And so he referred to that higher intelligence. Now, you're familiar with what ley line is? What a ley line is?
Yes.
All right. The ley line, and maybe we should help some of the people listen. Do you think we should do that, or do you think most people?
Sure.
All right. Ley line is spelled Ley, and the theory dates back over 100 years. Many people have looked at it, and it is that there are henges like Stonehenge and other stone situations around the world that line up on lines that are magnetically connected to the North Pole magnetic field. And that's why they call them lines. Now, tangent to that theory is the Bermuda Triangle, which also is purported to have magnetic properties. If you take the triangle of the Bermuda Triangle, there's three vortexes, right? Three come together. One of those vortexes is the front door of Coral Castle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And here's a guy with a third, fourth grade education down in the middle of Nowheresville, Homestead, Florida at the time. And he figures that out. Now I'm going to answer your question a different way. And there are elements. and we talk about these in the back of the book.
Mm-hmm.
There are these elements that he put in the castle that really don't have a whole lot to do. Some of them do with the weight, and the one I'll talk about has to do with the weight. But they transcend just the fact that these things are heavy. These elements in the castle that he put in the castle transcend the fact that they're just heavy. And
Mm-hmm.
one of them is heavy because it's a 5,000-pound swinging door. 5,000-pound slab of this oolite limestone, this coral rock that he cut and mounted in the middle of a hole in the wall, and it's large.
Huh.
And it was a swinging, picture a 5,000-pound rock swinging
Mm-hmm.
door, and there's a picture more than once he would demonstrate a little girl could push it. And she could just push the door and it would swing open, swing
Mm-hmm.
right angle. After Ed is deceased, that door collapsed. And now it's on the Historic National Registry. And the University of Florida somehow sends some engineering people
Mm-hmm.
down, and they're going to use a big crane. And there's a picture of like 5 or 6 of these, I think all guys, trying to lift this thing up. And the crane is bending, and they get it up, and they find it sitting on a Model A Ford truck axle. And in the hot sun in South Florida, it's rusted, and that's why the door collapsed. And they're studying this door now because they've got it apart.
Mm-hmm.
And what they said was, in order for that 5,000-ton piece of rock that he pulled out of the ground and somehow got up,
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of that rock is a very straight line that is gravitational, equidistant all the way around. How do you do that, right? I mean, it's
Right.
perfectly balanced, which is why a little kid can push the door.
Sure.
And they say that it is a perfectly straight line in the middle of that piece of rock. And the only way they know how that could have happened is if somebody took a laser beam and burnt that right straight up through that door.
Wow.
The laser beam was not yet invented by 30, 40 years by the time he did that.
So he had to have had some kind of help, obviously.
Huh. I mean, he didn't get the help from the University of Georgia or University of Florida. They didn't send him a laser beam because they hadn't been invented. Now, this thing turns on a, like I said, Model A Ford axle. And you know what a pestle is, right? You know,
Right.
a pestle to grind wheat.
Right.
Okay? Now, they're sitting there going, this is what sand is made out of.
Mm-hmm.
Coral rock gets pummeled and it turns into the beach. How could this piece of rock turn on this other piece of rock and not just grind it up before it rusted out? So they pull it up and they find this thin, not very large. I've held it in my hand. It's in the museum part where the gift shop is under glass, piece of rock that this Ford axle is sitting on with 5,000 pounds on top of it, swinging. Because they're the University of Florida engineering department, they send it up to Gainesville to the geology department. They have it for 2 or 3 weeks and send it back and say, material not of this earth.
Wow.
Okay? Now, let's say you and I go to Homestead, Florida, and they tell us that we got to go look around on the ground to find the rock in the swamp, in all this stuff that is from some other planet,
Uh-huh.
or they're going to shoot us. They might as well just shoot me because I'm never going to find it.
Uh-huh.
That how did he find it?
Uh-huh.
So the question is, what did he know, and how did he know it, and who told him,
Uh-huh.
and how did he put all these things together? So the answer to your question that you asked me, did he get help, alien help? He got knowledge that we don't have.
Right. Right. And how long did it take him to build this? Or was it never
12,
finished?
12, 15 years. And the
Wow.
reason I give you a range, because it just kind of evolved. He
Uh-huh.
actually moved it once. He moved it from one part of the town, Florida City, over to Homestead. And then he built more elements inside as he added the elements. So, he was up to 15 years, but the castle itself didn't take that long.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
it's now some of the people listening have been to castles. They've seen castles, Europe, Disney World,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
We're not talking about a castle that big. We're talking about a castle that a guy 5 feet tall built all by himself.
Uh-huh.
That's what makes it huge. That's what makes it so impressive because it is a big castle for one human being to do it in a decade and a half.
Uh-huh.
That's what's impressive.
Uh-huh.
What else?
Absolutely.
What else do you want to talk about?
How many rooms did this castle have?
All right. Well, it's a courtyard inside the walls.
Okay.
Okay. So you have to picture, and he has different sections in the room, in there that kind of qualify as rooms. Like one has chairs
Uh-huh.
for the long lost love Agnes who never came to visit him. You
Uh-huh.
know, one of the things he said was he wanted Agnes Scuffs, the girl that wouldn't marry him, to hear about the castle and come see him, marry
Uh-huh.
him. And so he built little chairs for their future kids. He
Uh-huh.
built beds for their kids and them. And then he built a dining room table, we'll call it. And it's huge, and it's made out of, all this is made out of coral rock. And it's in the shape of Florida. And then he put Lake Okeechobee in the right where it's supposed to be.
Uh-huh.
And these are all different rooms, and they're outside. And then he has a whole planetarium of very large Saturn, Jupiter rings, and so forth inside the castle. So they kind of count as rooms.
Uh-huh.
And he has a telescope. We can talk about that if you want to. But
Sure.
then he has his living quarters. And his living quarters are 2 stories high. And there's a room upstairs. There is a 16 carved stairway, one continuous carve that is
Huh.
massively heavy. And then it embodies these massive, look like these pieces look like a European castle built by
Uh-huh.
tons of servants, slaves, whoever. And his sleeping and living quarters are in the top, and below it is his workshop where he has at the time, a working generator where he could make his own electricity. And then he went to the junkyard and got wires and spools of wire, coat hangers, wine bottles, and he turned them into radio tubes, and he makes a radio that's powered by the electric generator, and that's all in his workshop room. So two
Wow.
rooms for his living, and all these chambers that are not covered by roof. The living quarters actually have suspended huge 25-foot high up in the air chunks of coral rock as their ceilings and their windows.
That's incredible.
It is. It
Absolutely
is.
incredible.
And I should say this would be a good time to talk about why it's so incredible. Is
Yeah, let's do
people,
that because I can't even wrap my head around that. It's just
well,
crazy.
in the lifetime of Ed and the 10 years after, people start moving into South Florida.
Hmm.
So you got a whole bunch of newcomers. And you got the old timers and the newcomers. A real estate agent is dealing with the newcomers.
Hmm.
And one of the most famous things there, Homestead Air Force Base is there. But one of the most, there's not much famous in Homestead, Florida. There's a race car track there now. But there's this castle. And of course, the newcomers go, nah, one guy didn't do this. That's what the locals say, blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah. You can just hear that, right?
Hmm.
Because, like you said, it's incredible. This
Hmm.
story's too incredible. So, this lady gets an affidavit and she goes around and gets all the people. I grew up in the town. I had the gas station. I was the postmaster. I was the third grade teacher. And I knew Ed. I worked, excuse me, he worked
Sure.
alone, he worked at night, and nobody helped him. And they sign it, write little notes, and every one of those signatures is notarized and put in the Dade County Courthouse. 285 of them. I went and got them all. And part of our book incorporates the notes they wrote in the margins of these affidavits.
Hmm.
Because, like you said, it's incredible. It's so incredible, it's going to be hard to believe.
Hmm.
But here's a cool story, too, for everybody that's listening. You can go see this one. You don't have to go down to the mountains of Peru or all these sites that are a lot more inaccessible. And what's interesting about this for me is that he did this in the lifetime of people who are still alive. At least they were in the late 1990s, early aughts when we put the book together. I mean, we could go and interview people. We found a lady in a nursing home. Her parents invited Ed for Thanksgiving dinner 2 or 3 years when she was in her late teens. Ed
Hmm.
came for Thanksgiving. And so she could tell us about him. And you can't do that with the Druids. You can't do
Hmm.
that with all these other places. And you can go in there, you can see that rock from a different planet that Ed used. It's right there.
Hmm.
And you can walk in and you can climb the stairs I just talked about. You
Right.
can see what used to be the swinging door. They could never repair it. Teams of people have looked at this, tried to repair it.
Hmm.
They still have yet to repair it. Dozens of years later, they can't repair it the way Ed built it.
Hmm.
I mean, go
What I
figure.
find what I find interesting about this, how far out of town was this? Was this a place where people could obviously see stuff being built, or was this far enough out to where if these ships were providing him with this stone that nobody was able to see?
Well, he was digging down and getting the stone himself.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Um, yeah. Let me go back to Riga. We've
Okay.
established that his family was from a family of stonecutters. And that's how he ended up in the Pacific Northwest. He was cutting those big trees for a living because he could cut stone. We don't know for sure, a lot
Right.
of this. A lot of it's secondhand, and you know how I figured out his height and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we pretty well document what we know, and we tell you what we don't know.
Right.
But he was cutting. He was on those crews of people who cut those huge trees. They still cut trees, but they were doing it by hand. He ends up in Homestead. He's a stone cutter. His grandfather was a stone cutter outside of Rigalappia. So he wasn't getting the stone from anywhere. He was mining it himself and lifting it himself.
Okay.
Now, to answer your question, he was out in the country because
Okay.
800, a town with 800 is out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But he was out in the country from the town out of the country. He moved to be either next to the ley line
Mm-hmm.
or or he collected quarters by people going up and down what turned into South Dixie Highway, south of Miami, on the way to the
Mm-hmm.
Florida Keys. And people would stop like they do all over the world to tourist places. And he would charge them a quarter and give them a tour.
Okay. Okay. In the research that you did, I mean, how much was available for you to research? Because, I mean, the guy was so private.
Um, Except he gave public tours. He was
That's true.
private. He was a hermit, but
Mm-hmm.
he liked to talk to people, and he was kind of a hermit as he lived. But he gave these tours, and we found pictures. Now we went all over the town, and we ended up at a bank. Now, you remember Homestead's bigger now, but
Mm-hmm.
there aren't that many banks. We went to a bank. Hey, we're doing this book. What can you tell us? Well, the old banker says, you know, we have a safe deposit in the base, down the safe deposit. And in that safe deposit, we have a whole bunch of pictures. You want to see them? Yeah. So we go in there. They have the negatives and everything. They're in our book now. Okay. And they said, as long as you give us credit, we'll be glad. Nobody had ever seen those. They'd forgotten about them. But the bank knew that they were there. And they said,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we'd like somebody to share them. We'll share them. We'll put them in our book. Now, if you look at the books, this is important. If you look at the pictures, he had 3 pieces of Florida pine,
Mm-hmm.
3 pieces of Florida pine, telephone pole stuff. Picture that.
Hmm.
He had some pulleys and chains. And in the pictures, at the top of these tripods are black boxes.
Hmm.
You can see them in the pictures. We put them in the book. In one of the pictures, there's actually 2 of these Florida pine tripod chain, nothing special.
Mm-hmm.
And each one of those tripods is a black box.
Hmm.
We believe those black boxes have something to do with how he got these big pieces of rock up in the air.
Makes sense. Yeah. Wow.
When he went to the hospital, no one ever saw those black boxes. When
Hmm.
he went off to die, something happened, and those black boxes either went to somebody who never spoke about them,
Mm-hmm.
or he figured out how to make those disappear before he went off to the hospital in Miami to die,
Mm-hmm.
which is how I started all this in the book writing business. I'd already written one book and I'd done really well. And I just figured out how to write a kind of a Dr. No kind of scientific discovery James Bond type mystery thriller about a guy who has some technological breakthrough. And
Mhm.
my book, Cincinnatus, posits that he handed those black boxes in that mystery off to an arm of George Washington's secret society, the Society of the Cincinnati, and then it goes from there. But
Mhm.
that's all me just making it up, and that's how I backed into writing the actual book that
Mhm.
we've been talking about. But
Mhm.
the truth is, he either took those black boxes and made them so that nobody would ever find them, or he handed them to somebody who's been very, very quiet
Mhm.
for decades, and no one has ever surfaced. And more importantly, not one of those black boxes has ever surfaced.
Mhm. Very interesting. Here's a question. I'm just wondering, how did he cook food, or did he cook food,
Yeah.
how did he sustain
Um,
himself?
that's a great question. Those quarters helped because people would, on the way to the Florida Keys, as people started drifting down there in the 30s and the 40s,
Mhm.
he would charge a quarter. He also grew vegetables in the grounds area, those 10 acres I told you he built the castle on. And
Yeah.
he would swap vegetables for kerosene at the gas station hardware store. So people
Mhm.
would buy vegetables from him, and he would sell, and he would eat the vegetables, and he'd feed them to a pig or two, and a goat.
Mhm.
And remember, he's a very, very thin 5'10" guy, although he's very muscular with really rough hands because he's
Mhm.
a stonemason, stone cutter. But he figured out how to eat. He
Right.
figured out how to get kerosene and cook. He had a cooking pot that he used. It's all still there, and it's pretty well preserved. There are a few pieces missing. We know that because we've seen pictures, and then we look at what's there,
Mhm.
and some of it disappeared before they really knew what they had. And the people who own it are great custodians of the place. They're more than
Mhm.
custodians. They're legacy people, and
Mhm.
um, and so they've taken great care of it. But there was a gap from the time that Ed died till the state of Florida tried to reach out to his. He had no children. He had four brothers, and one of them ended up in the United States, or a nephew, and it slowly got sold by the state of Florida after they took it over. And they've done a pretty good job. Other than no, they've done a great job. Other than the missing pieces, and you can go see the pots that he cooked in it,
Oh.
and he made a living there. He was a hermit, but he
Mhm.
made a living. He would get on the bus, go to Miami, and check out all kinds of physics and math kinds of books. You have to
Mhm.
remember, he third, fourth grade education, like I've said. Latvia is his native tongue. He used to go sit in the cool of the movie theater. So long ago, there were subtitles because they
Mhm.
were they weren't sound movies,
Right.
and teach himself English. He sit in the dark and the cool because it's hot, like you were talking about at the top end of this show in California
Mhm.
right now. And he would go. It's hot in South Florida, but he would go and watch the movie, and he'd figure out the words. He had to have a high IQ.
Mhm. He had to have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. It's just like I said earlier. It's hard to wrap my head around. Him being able to do all that. And do the construction that he did.
Um, you want to hear another one?
Sure.
You got time? All right.
I got time.
I talk about these obelisks that he built.
Mhm.
Um, these are huge by Neolithic Stonehenge stone, you know, type technology. These are very tall. I mean, 42 feet high and 42 tons. I mean, 42 tons is how are you going to lift that, right?
Right.
He drills a hole in the top. Somehow he gets it up in the air. It's a round hole, and there's a coat hanger going vertical, like from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Another one going horizontal from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So you got 4 quadrants, right? This thing is, I'm going to say 5 to 6 plus inches thick. I mean, this is real at the top. It's even thicker on the way down. Great big obelisk. And he's going to stick it in the ground perfectly. Because here's what I'm going to tell you. Way on the other side, he's got a piece of metal anchored into one of these mega rocks. And if you go and sight the end of that metal to that round hole I just described,
Right.
each quadrant is a different season perfectly. So in other words, each solstice, each 13 weeks is going to be exactly lined up so that the image moves. Now, how do you get that thing up in the air at all?
Right.
How do you twist it so that it does what I just told you? I mean, it's not just that it's up in the air, it's the refinement of these things so that elements like the swinging door, like what he called the telescope, work. They work. And long after he's deceased, they're still working.
Right.
I mean, they outlive him. They defy the how would you do that?
Right.
How could you do that? But he did it. And he left it for us to ponder. And if you go visit it, you can draw your own conclusions. I say this at the end of the book. I say, go visit it yourself. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. You will not be disappointed. You'll go, oh my God, it's better than we described. And I also say to everyone, there's more to this castle than meets the eye.
Right.
I think I'm going to inflation and correct this. I just looked up in the book. He actually collected 10 cents in the beginning, not 25. 25 is too much money back then. It was 10 cents. Anyway, the fact that he could do this and pull it off, I mean, this is prior to slide rules, which were prior to calculators, which were prior to everything we use now and take for granted. This guy did all this math and this engineering theory, and then he sat down and carved it and lifted it, put it in place perfectly. How? That's the question.
That is a great question. How many times have you been out there to check it out?
Oh, probably to check it out. I check it out every time I go, but I've probably been there at least 10 times. But I've given talks. Ancient Aliens flew me down there to the History Channel, and I'm on television. You can see that rerun if you want to see it. But to analyze it, the first time was the wonder time, and so I would say that one time was a long and detailed visit of wonder. And then all the rest of them were after we figured out we were going to write books and we were going to talk about it. Then I've been there quite a few times, like 10. But I never get tired of going to visit it. Um, I only have one regret, and that is that Ed, and I don't think they can pull it off, but Ed's buried in a very nondescript grave in Miami, and I'd like to know one day that they brought him home. They put him in the. I mean, there's land around it. I mean, today Homestead, Florida's grown up around it. There's a subway and a railroad and overpasses and things like that. Subway meaning subway, fast food subway, not a subway underground, of course. But there's still land there, and I'd like to know that Ed's final resting place was there, because that's what he did. That's my way of telling you how much I admire the guy.
What drew you out to it in the first place?
Kind of like what I told you at the top end. I found this brochure. I'm a big time reader. A lot of off the road tourist places are not worth staying. They're not worth it.
Right.
And this thing sounded authentic, and that was enough for me to want to read more. Then when I read more, it became more authentic, and Ed became more of a mysterious guy who left something on this earth that was really cool. And it just kind of grew on me. And then the internet came along, and I every once in a while would see something about him. It was just a little paragraph. I mean, and I just wanted to know more. I'm not alone here. People are drawn to Coral Castle and Ed. So I'm one of those people. And I think unlike some people, I mean, I told you I incorporated it into a novel. And it's called Cincinnatus, and it purports that before he died, he gave the secrets of how he did it to somebody else. But that's me coming up. That's just me figuring something out. But what I saw were people who were trying to figure out how he did it, and they were kind of inching over some imaginary line that I've spoken about now, that they just didn't really. At some point, they had all these great attraction to him, and then there'd be all these theories, and the theories would kind of eclipse Ed. And so what I wanted to do was say, here's, we have 2 chapters about the different theories, but he's a little bit like Nicholas Tesla, who was mysteriously dealing with radio waves, magneticity, if you want to call it. He many of the things he said, without scientific anything to back it up, are very close to Einstein's concepts. That, I mean, Ed and Einstein together, without knowing each other or anything else, both say that light is affected by magnets. That's really what Ed was trying to say, in my opinion, about magneticity.
Right.
And it's exactly what E = mc squared, the little bit I think I understand. And what they're saying is that light and magnets and gravity are similar. And what Ed kind of says is that if gravity is like magnets, and magnets have poles that you can flip over like you do on a refrigerator magnet, and they push against each other, they defy,
Mhm.
the attraction, the opposite of the attraction. Well, then if you could make gravity defy itself, you would levitate those rocks, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
And that is what Ed is saying in his own way, perhaps.
Mhm.
He never left the breadcrumbs all the way to that black box. He never
Right.
fully explained anything, and then he died. So,
Right.
um, but he did something before he died. He built the castle. Now, a lot of
Right.
these other people have theories, but they don't have anything to show for it. He's kind of the opposite. He didn't explain the theory as well, but he sure as heck built a castle that no one can replicate. So he asked me the question. The little bit more I knew, the little bit more I knew. I'm like a lot of people. I'm not the only guy or gal that thinks this is cool. And
Right.
it's one of these things that when you learn more, it's cooler.
Right.
And then you learn more and it's coolest. And that's how I feel about Ed and his castle.
Fantastic. What's next for you?
Oh, I have a new novel that's got another secret.
Okay.
It comes out November 1st, and I have my name's Rusty McClure, and I'm not going to use up your time here, but you can Google RUSTYMCCLURE, and I've written 3 books in my having sold a big company and not doing retirement well, and I'm kind of a bullshit artist and a talker. I love stories. Everybody has a story, and so I have professional writers that help me, and I'm kind of the storyteller, and they're the real authors, and we work together, and we write books. So we're writing
Cool.
more books, telling more stories, and writing more books.
Fantastic. How can people find you, sir?
On the internet, just Google me. Rusty,
Okay.
RUSTY is my nickname, but everybody knows me as Rusty. Nobody knows my real name. I mean, I don't hide it. It's George, but you
Sure.
won't find George. Go RUSTYMCCLURE, and
Fantastic.
you can find Coral Castle the book. You can find the novel Cincinnatus, and you can find the story. You can find the story of consumer radio, like
Mhm.
Henry Ford created consumer cars,
Mhm.
wrote the first and only book about the 2 brothers in Cincinnati, Ohio, that did the same thing for radio.
Cool.
And they created not only the radio is the same as a car, they made a radio available, mass produced a radio, $10, like Henry Ford mass produced a car.
Mhm.
Henry Ford had to wait for the government to build the roads because the roads weren't good enough. They were mud, and you had to get your horse out in
Right.
April because the equivalent to the roads is the radio station. And these 2 guys built the radio station. They had the world's most powerful radio station,
Mhm.
and they were the manufacturer they were the number 1 manufacturer of the $10 radio. And nobody
Nice.
wrote that book. So you could, the name of that book's Crosley. They can find it. All you do is just Google Rusty McClure, and you'll get more than you want about me. It's not about me. It's about the stories. How's
Right.
that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I learned so much tonight. That castle has fascinated me for years, and I thank you so much.
Um, there's more to that castle than meets the eye. That's what I say at the end of the book. And
Mhm.
I say, figure out what you draw your own conclusion. Instead of
Mhm.
me, I'm not pitching my theory. That was one of the things that made me write the book.
Right.
We have a bunch of theories in there, but we say all they are is theories. So you go and decide. So
Mhm.
how I want to end it is just to you yourself. One day go see it and draw your own conclusion. Draw your
Absolutely.
own conclusion. And if you do that, and you think about it, send me a selfie.
I'll do that.
Okay?
I'll do that.
All
Definitely do
right.
that. All right,
Good
sir.
talking with you.
You have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Well, I learned a lot about that. And like I said, that coral castle has fascinated me for years and years. And you guys know I'm old now, so yeah. But anyway, yeah. So that was fantastic talking with him, and I hope you guys enjoyed that too. And like he says, Google it. You can see photos all over the internet of it, and it's just it's fantastic. Okay, tomorrow night we're changing the schedule a little bit because I have a special guest coming on Friday evening who I'm going to be talking about voodoo with, New Orleans voodoo with. She's been on before, and so she's going to come on with me on Friday. But tomorrow, Nancy Matz will be on, and we're going to be talking about our needs to have spirit pets. So it's all about spirit dogs and kitties and our animals after they pass. So I hope you guys join me tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific for that. And then Friday will be Rory Schmidt, Rory O'Neill Schmidt, or Rory. I can't even say it. Or Rory. What is it with that? Rory O'Neill Schmidt. It's going to be fun when I do the intro for it. It took me about 87 takes. But she's going to be with us to talk about voodoo in New Orleans. And she's interviewing me in the afternoon on Friday also for a new book that she's writing. And it has a lot of paranormal stuff in there, ghosts and things. So I'm excited about that project. Anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. I see Pamela was in the chat room, and I think Marisa was lurking out there. And for everybody that's going to be listening later on, thank you very much. And if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hate the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're equal opportunity here. Just trying to get the word out about our little show. All right, guys, I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And thank you all for coming. Have a great evening.